Oh dear. A long time ago, I knew some people who just rejected the Labour Party full stop. I guess as a direct result, many years later, I found myself living in a place built by an organisation which arranged to kill US President John F. Kennedy, November 22, 1963, in a place in Texas. Now, the date for the killing supposedly had religious significance because a new church was to be opened on November 22, 1963, a Baptist church in an area where there was nothing spiritual going on whatsoever. It was the center of a long time ago, pre-World War II. It was the center of what is commonly referred to as witchcraft. Had a worldwide following. Witchcraft. Witchcraft. So what some so-called religionists did was, build some churches in the area so that at least it was possible to avoid being caught up in international witchcraft. You know what I mean by witchcraft? Look it up yourself. Try to find out what witchcraft was about, say, in the 1920s. One of the things that witchcraft relied upon was mass murder as a means to get spirits, to obtain, disembodied spirits, sort of thing. And one of the things about it is that while science had gone ahead leaps and bounds in the 1800s, say in Europe, science, sort of doesn't play any part whatsoever in witchcraft. It also doesn't really play much of a role in church religions or in Islamic religions either. For example, Japan experienced modern science when 2 atom bombs blew up there. The Japanese religionists are still engaged in, witchcraft, which recently resulted in them killing the Prime Minister of Japan. This state was formulated to further that concept of witchcraft. as the witchcraft place was on Green Hill Road in a suburb called Unley, Unley. Was written about certain details, such as the ones I just mentioned, were not made known to the reader. Now, the reader was an Italian man who was a professor with two identities, two different identities. One being Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, as in the name Car Lucy, or in terms of that order book, somebody said we need a book for all the kids at high school to read, and the name of the agent, the Soviet agent, is Carlucci, spelled Carlucci, which is a slightly, you could say, variation on the professor's surname, or the one he used, Carlucy. If you are a theosophist, which was gaining great ground, theosophy was gaining great ground as a result of killing various members of royalty in the eastern part of the continent, where Europe was on the left, and then there were some, I don't know, mountains or something, and over past the mountains there was the east, and theosophy arose as a direct result of killing royalty who were there in the east. So in that regard, it's a belief system about, killing people to gain witchcraft power, witchcraft, spirits. And so really unfortunate that I was living in the place built by the people who had arranged to assassinate US President John F. Kennedy in 1963, November 22. The November 22 Baptist Church, and Lyndon Johnson was a Baptist. It was on the other side of town, Unley, King William Road, next to Young Street on the corner. And to prove that they arranged to kill Kennedy, they opened a shop eventually opposite the Baptist Church with a tiny little train set that the people involved in the plot had given their son named David to play with before the assassination. It's a real interesting that the depths of depravity involved even extended to TV. Like TV, that new invention where somebody projects a beam 360 degrees from someplace in the hills via an antenna, vibrations of a higher magnitude, short order sort of radiation. and they had to name the system that was used for the TV stations to use, and they had to name a PAL because there was a character with absolutely nothing spiritual going on in his life, who once a month would kill a chicken and cook and eat it, and he was known as Pal. Now, you might be wondering why there's things like, what is it? Well, there's a lot of things now in business created by, what is it called? US TV media. TV media that's so big and worth so much as US presidents of the United States. So, PayPal, for example, the computer thing, system to pay, it's based on the idea of a character who used the name Pal. Poor guy's wife had died or something, and he had to keep on living. And once a month, he'd cut off the head of a chicken and cook it and eat it. And they knew those details. The people who killed John Kennedy knew those details, and so to keep the conspiracy going, made it so that anyone who was watching TV was watching the PAL system. Why is that? They have nothing spiritual going on in their lives. They don't aim to do anything for a higher cause. They aim to do things for a lower cause. And so the society, which might have been halfway decent, degenerates slowly and quickly, and there's no way to stop it. But living in the place that the people who killed Kennedy, 1963, November 22, proved to be quite interesting, because unbeknown to anybody here who was involved in that plot, I happened to be in touch with someone who had more or less made India an independent nation. And Mahatma Gandhi was sort of like the legal figure, who was the man seen on the movies and everything else, and even he is used. So, for example, where they commemorate the mass murder of 6 million Jews in German ovens they fried, they use Gandhi, Mahatma Gandhi, or Mohan Gandhi, as the, I don't know, not the lawyer, but as the great man who was able to do what he did totally through non-violent means. And so he arranged for Britain to lose the colony of 1 billion people. It's now 1.6 billion people lose the colony. And so I was in touch with his partner in crime, who was in Africa for a time. There are some pretty good states in Africa where they're quite modern, they've been nicely built, people do things. but the idea of their businesses, the way they make money, is sort of like pawnbroking, or killing something, or blah blah blah. But I was in touch with this character who worked with Gandhi to free India, and nobody knew that. And so the people who arranged to kill Kennedy had a plot directed towards me. For example, John Lennon had no spirituality to him at all. None of those rock stars, none of those pop bands like Bob Dylan, nothing spiritual at all. None of them have any sort of higher understanding or realization. Even the transcendental meditation movement really doesn't have any sort of higher realization to offer. But if you do Maharishi meditation, you can go to India and visit places that have been around for 4,000 years, known as pilgrimage sites, where they teach meditation. Because like what we are supposed to do 3,000 years ago after you'd eaten food, and what were you supposed to do? They figured out ways and means for people to just learn to sit still and do nothing. TV is just about the same. But as I said, it uses the PAL system. The thing about America, USA, is there's nothing spiritual going on there. It was formed by Methodists. Methodists founded the United States of America, seemingly. I mean, they were the official, the first president or whatever. I believe he was a Methodist. So there's method to their madness. Aha. They used to grow an awful lot of tobacco in America because it's pretty easy to grow. It should be known that Russians also were high up there in the formation of the nation of United States. Russians from Russia. You know what I mean? With their Protestantism, their Methodism, sort of thing. So it's really quite funny. A lot of funny things happened while I was living at the place where the people who killed Kennedy had built it. And there was nothing physically good going on. Everything involved murder and violence, usually involving the state. But I was in touch with this character who worked with Gandhi. And we would exchange letters of a type, and and I'd even make a donation. The only spiritual thing that he was able to do was to stop himself and his people from doing anything that involved violence. You know, like the present government of India, they don't mind doing violence. They don't mind going to war. They don't mind warfare. You know, as a matter of fact, they've recently done some pretty bad things, pretty violent warfare inside India to eradicate or erase persons who lived in America who started, let's say, the Self-Realization Fellowship, or were involved with Gandhi and non-violence, because the history of India really basically is all about the biggest war that ever took place, and that's the basis of their entire spirituality. The biggest war that ever took place, and both sides were killed off, all of them killed off each other, and it was the biggest war. And so, you know, to liberate India, they had to have the biggest war that had ever taken place in Europe as well. You know, so in that regard, history repeats itself, and there's no spirituality involved. But what happened was that when living there, the Catholic Church was able to break free of the shackles of the Holy Roman Empire and have some popes come into the office who were not Italians. And of course, Italians really took umbrage to that, and still do, which is why you never see the popes on TV anymore, because they, you know, the Romans, the Italians here in particular, you know, don't like anything that isn't Roman, Italian. Carlucci, of course, was Italian. You know what I mean? The name in that book, The Catcher in the Rye, Carlucci, that's an Italian name. Apparently, my friend who worked with Gandhi pointed out at one stage that The Catcher in the Rye was a made-to-order book, written, made-to-order. You could probably visualize it or imagine that somebody says, now we need these names in this book. We need these kind of references. We want everybody who reads this book to have the possibility of going crazy or insane. And so the big business that Carlucci was involved in was dealing with people who are insane. And that helped the German drug companies because they made drugs that they could be sold. And the Irish, for example, by then, but in 1800s, had the idea that to be religious, you had to take drugs. To be religious, not spiritual, but to be religious, you had to take drugs. What sort of drugs? Well, I'm pretty sure they didn't use cocaine, but Freud, you know, the father of psychiatry, the German man, apparently he was a cocaine addict. And once he realized that he was an addict, he moved to England and stopped using cocaine. and I believe he had 5 or 6 children, and one was named Julian. And so his effect in the world of consciousness, of their theology of how to run a state exists. And people like, let's say, John Lennon with his son Julian, is sort of like a take on Freud, whose son Julian followed in his footsteps and became a master painter, somebody who painted. And that's about all there was to it, really. But there is something called the spiritual life, and living in the place built by the people who arranged to kill President John Kennedy in America, 1963. The point about that was to remove the possibility of anything spiritual. However, because I was in contact with that character, what was going on for me involved, I don't know, you could say double vision. Seeing 2 realities at the same time. So the big book, for example, that just about everything that happened here to do with, say, the killing of one of the parents of some girls I knew, that formed the basis of the Carlos Castaneda books. In the last 20 years, there's been 100 million people listening to readings of those books. And what's it about? It's about the killing of the parents of some girls I knew, involving, and it's described in terms of witchcraft, sorcery, the occult. So they take you back, us, everyone, to that witchcraft place, Green Hill Road. Now it's situated on Young Street, where that Baptist church, November 22, 1963, was open, because they have to fight against anything religious, because the state government isn't a religion, although they've tried to use biblical ideas and concepts and descriptions as their state. You know what I mean? Like, for example, he holds 7 stars. So what they do is place 7 stars on their flag, or they open a pub called 7 Stars. And there's nothing spiritual about that. But in America, though, for example, in America, for example, they did visit those 7 planets, but they aren't the 7 stars. But they did visit those 7 planets. It took an awful lot of effort to do that. But living in the place built by the people who arranged to kill from Adelaide, South Australia, John F. Kennedy, Catholic US president, proved to be quite an interesting experience, because there were people whose sole philosophy was to create conflict and wars. They were called the TM Society. And, it's just terrible how it permeates all levels of man's thinking, so that conflict and violence takes place. And they're able to say that they're totally, guilt-free and innocent, because what they were doing is just nothing more than using words. Oh, and of course, meditating twice a day. So, what happened to the partner of Mahatma Gandhi? By then he was Mahatma Gandhi. The first thing was that the people who killed in the eastern part of the continent, the royal families there, were saying that, oh, there are just so many Mahatmas in India. And what did those Mahatmas do? They sure didn't, create India as a sovereign nation, no longer connected via politics and law to the Great Britain. They didn't do that, that's for sure. And once persons of that sort of ilk learned that Gandhi's partner was alive and living in London, they burnt him to death at an address called 22 Rother. What was it? No, that's the other address. What was the address? That address where he was there was what's the word? Enabling Mormonism to I don't know, gain sort of strength to the extent that the Mormons built a $20 or $30 million granite temple. And the whole point about the granite temple is that they give what you would think, if you're a Baptist, was and now I've forgotten what it's called, a baptism, where you go into the River Jordan, or you go into the river and you get submerged and you get baptized. Well, Mormonism is all about, apart from the books and stuff, being baptized. It's interesting though, just as an aside, I'll end this way. I had a friend on a baseball team named Chris Smith, and his father was a policeman who, would eat anything and just do anything with no religion and no spirituality at all. And so what happened to Chris and his sister is they died in a car crash, and the Mormons at the time, the exact same time, had Donnie and Marie Osmond on TV doing a pop song here. And the funny thing was that Donnie and Marie looked almost exactly identical to Chris and his sister who died in that car crash. So when that happened, I sort of realized that I'm going to have to go and find a man who I'm going to have to get involved in spiritual life rather than organized crime. And so off I went. While I was at the place built by the people who killed Kennedy in 1963, as I said before, the Catholic Church was able to gain sort of independence from Rome. There were no more Italians as the Pope. And they did some good things, I suppose, if you happen to believe in, whatever freedom or whatever. But the reactions, because religion involves, mass movements, lots of people doing the same thing. It's almost like an army, or it's like whatever you want to think of it is like. And so there's been quite a lot of opposition or reactions to what happened. And at the moment, well, anyway, and it's ongoing now. And the unfortunate thing is that the eastern part of the continent, where the royals were killed, and one of the people who killed them was one of the people who was second or third informing the United States government, first government. A Russian guy named Douglas, the actor, or related to Michael Douglas as well. Well, his ancestor, Russian, the fourth person who created the United States. And he had no spiritual realizations or anything like that. They did everything by the book, and so, they were literalists. And that's why there's an ongoing war now between Russia and that Jewish man, Zelensky, because it's funny if you want to look at it as funny, but there's no spirituality. Like they got modern weapons. They don't have atomic bombs. So all the atomic bombs have been removed and taken somewhere else. And of course, the whole idea well, to put it in another way, the whole idea of those kind of religions was to employ a form of slavery of the population, to get them to believe and accept the book, the teaching of the book, and the way to do it was to a form of slavery or enslave them, but not with a whip and nailing them up or anything like that, just a form of teaching or whatever you want to call it. And that's failed as far as anyone can see. And so there's now that stuff going on with the idea that there's going to be some more wars. And so that witchcraft place on Green Hill Road, Spiritism, will be able to get some more spirits. And the UK ban the police, they'll be able to get some more spirits in the material world, and all that false teachings. It's interesting, like, for example, your George Harrison, we are spirits living in the material world. One of his ancestors has had a funeral parlor here called Harrison since the 1910s. And they've taken to advertising it on TV now quite a lot. But it all comes down to the guy who would chop the chickens' heads off. He used the name Powell. Okay, so that's about all. But some momentous events did take place while I was living at the place built by the people who arranged to kill U.S. President Catholic Kennedy. And then, of course, Johnson, the Baptist, took over, and he had to sort of complete the Vietnam War and all of that. And while that was going on, the Australian Liberal Party Prime Minister disappeared, so that when the US soldiers came to Australia on leave, whatever you want to call it, their level of intelligence was as high as or equal to the guy who was the Prime Minister of Australia, because there's nothing going on in Australia that's real. There's nothing spiritual. There's nothing spiritual, quite the opposite. So goodbye, and that's the end of this talk. I hope you enjoy your Easter and all of that.